Just a couple housekeeping items, and I want to introduce the city staff who's here with us this evening. First, thank you to Mayor Liccardo and Councilmember Perales for joining us this evening. You'll hear from them shortly. And then as far as other city staff here from the Housing Department, I'd like to introduce Kelly Hemphill, who is the manager of the city's homeless response programs. James Stagey, who oversees our temporary and interim housing construction programs, and then Matt Kano, Director of Public Works, and Rodney Rapson, who's also a division manager with Public Works, are all here this evening, and you'll hear from folks during the presentation. And then a few housekeeping items. This meeting will be recorded, and the recording will be available on the Housing Department's website. And then there will be a brief presentation, and at the end of the presentation, there'll be time to speak and answer questions. We ask that you use the chat function for questions. And now I will turn it over to Mayor Liccardo.
Hey, thank you, Reagan. Thanks for the introduction. I want to thank the members of the community who have come to get engaged in this really important conversation about what we're doing with this particular site and really a larger strategy in tackling homelessness. I think everyone recognizes that this is a challenge that is really is gripping cities throughout the state, and in fact, well beyond California, from Denver really west. I can tell you, I routinely talk to mayors in cities throughout the Western United States, from San Diego to Seattle. And the reality is no one has found a solution. We're all working on many solutions, and some of them are working better than others. It just so happens that this is one of the solutions that's working best, and that is emergency interim housing for moving many people off the street, getting them into dignified housing, and offering them a pathway to self-sufficiency, which I think is something we all want. At the same time, we recognize that our resources are scarce, our time is scarce. We've got thousands of residents out there on the street, and we have to move quickly. And what we have seen through the great efforts of many city staff, led by Matt Kano and James Stagey and others who have been working hard on this, is that emergency interim housing is something that we have launched in just the last year and a half or so since the pandemic started. And we've had an incredible success in getting 3 projects built in record time, in a matter of months rather than a matter of years, getting projects built at a small fraction of what it costs to build permanent housing, which we know is critically important, but we also know is very costly given our limited resources. And if we're able to build this interim emergency housing at perhaps $100,000 or $110,000 a unit, that is a tremendous boon at a time when it's costing perhaps $700,000, $750,000, $800,000 a unit to build traditional units of housing in its typical apartment building in the Bay Area. So this is a model that's working very effectively for us so far. And for us, I mean, for the more than 340 residents we've been able to bring off the street into emergency interim housing in 3 sites in San Jose. And it has attracted a lot of interest, as this particular project has, from the philanthropic community, because throughout the Bay Area, they're looking for solutions that can actually work. And in this case, we're fortunate to have the very generous support of a wonderful philanthropist who is deeply engaged with us in this project, and actually another project that we've already built. And in fact, another philanthropist is now interested on a 5th project. So this is exactly what we need to be able to scale the resources to address and tackle this problem. So I just wanted to say, first, I'm grateful for the work of the city staff in moving nimbly to see how we could get these emergency housing communities up and running. I'm grateful, certainly, to the generous donors who are jumping in to help. I expect that this will come to the city council for a vote in mid-September, and we are likely to break ground sometime in October. We'll hear more information about that. And this is part of a larger strategy we have to reclaim what I know many of our residents in downtown, because I live in downtown myself, feel they've lost right now in terms of lack of access to parks, basic public spaces and amenities like the Guadalupe River Park. There's no question that what has happened there has been devastating, and many residents are simply afraid to use the park right now. And so this is the first of many steps that we are taking to reclaim that Guadalupe River Park. I think that's going to be critically important. And we hope that down the road, our vision is that some of these residents who will be here will also be involved in a work program that will enable them to be stewards for this park for the betterment of the whole community. So they will be helping to repair and to clean and to revitalize that park. And so the residents that we're helping will in fact be very much part of the solution. This is going to be part of a longer effort to try to move more people, hundreds of people out of the park who are living there now. We know we have an FAA order we're grappling with to move people out of that space. And we don't simply want to push them somewhere else in the city where they're going to be homeless. We want to get them housed and solve the problem rather than simply kicking the can. So I'm grateful for everyone's hard work. I'm grateful for the community's engagement, and I look forward to what will be an important conversation. And I know at times a difficult conversation. There's plenty of frustration around homelessness right now. It's broadly shared, and it's fair game. This is the time for us to be talking about it. I do want to extend a particular thanks to Raul Perales, who's been, I think, a great champion for addressing homelessness issues in the downtown district in a time when I think many council members and cities throughout the Bay Area and even in our own city are happy to say, go build it somewhere else. Councilmember Perales recognizes that we have obviously a unique responsibility in San Jose, and particularly in the downtown where the problem is so seriously and acutely felt that we need to provide the housing in the downtown. So with that, I just want to, I think I'm introducing Raul, is that right? All right, so I'll turn over the Zoom to Councilmember Perales. Councilmember, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I want to echo the appreciation as well to you and your office. You have been consistent in your support of these efforts, and like tonight, where you're willing to come out in support of the efforts, come in front of the community. That's a commitment that you've made during your tenure as mayor in what have been, as we know, very challenging meetings at times, and certainly we know that these are the solutions that we need. Really a multitude of more, and so appreciate your support of these solutions. And really, in this regard, I think you have been steadfast and pushing for the funding, which has been really key, because we have an opportunity site. Actually, this particular site has been an opportunity site really since the first conversation that I had with housing team when we were looking at identifying locations for tiny homes and bridge housing communities. This was a site that has really always been up there on the list and is a high scoring opportunity site. So I'm actually really glad that we finally now have that opportunity to move forward with this site. We know we have a huge need. I don't need to echo the challenges that we have literally just on the other side of the freeway there along our Guadalupe River, as the mayor already described, and as community members that live in and around the area can see. This past year has really just exacerbated and highlighted the challenges that we know have been persistent in not just downtown, but throughout our city and our county. And we've seen this really be the case across the state and across the country. And so I want to say thank you to our housing staff that have worked diligently to protect this vulnerable population in our city. We had, at the onset of COVID-19, the huge task in front of us. And we actually, here in the city of San Jose, we were able to keep our over 5,000 plus residents safe from any major outbreaks of the virus due to the measures that we took, albeit again a huge challenge now in front of us as we begin to exit the pandemic. And so creating shelter like this, in addition to the 700 shelter beds that we were able to create last year since the pandemic, is really the solution that we know that that we need. We have that looming abatement that we know is going to happen there along the Guadalupe River Parkway due to the FAA requirements, and are working through that. So we're estimating several hundred, maybe upwards of 300-400 individuals that will potentially be displaced, and we know where they'll end up all throughout our communities if we don't identify places to rehouse them. And that's what a site like this gives us that opportunity to do. And it gives us an opportunity really right within the same community. And as the mayor pointed out, it gives us an opportunity to create chances for the park itself, the Guadalupe River, the Conservancy, to potentially benefit from. And that's something we haven't seen with some of these housing sites, and that's a creative solution that the mayor is helping to spearhead, and I'm happy to be working with him on that, because I think that we want to see more of that. I know our community wants to see more of that as well. As we create these housing opportunities, how do we also create some opportunities to give back to the community at large there? And so with that, I want to now thank everybody who's with us participating. I see we have close to 40 participants on the attendee side, and we have our staff with us as well. Thank you as well for your patience. I know that this was a meeting that was planned, and your flexibility as well as we rescheduled. And so thank you for our community for that and for joining us tonight. And hopefully you have a great opportunity to learn more about this and then have some of your questions answered. And I believe I'm turning it over to James Stagey, but I am not 100% certain. So
I'll take it from here.
Okay, Reagan. All right, Reagan.
Hey, Reagan, could I just jump in really briefly?
Yeah.
You know, one thing I mentioned to philanthropists, I never bothered to actually name the persons actually and thank them. And that is Peter and Susanna Powell, for those who want to know, who have been so incredibly generous, not just in their willingness to support and give money to make this happen, but the millions of dollars they've already given at another site that is currently housing families that are homeless. And I think Candace Gonzalez is with us as well from their company. So we're just very grateful for their support. Thank you, Reagan.
Thanks, Mayor. I just had one more housekeeping item. I misspoke earlier. If folks could use the Q&A function for their questions rather than the chat function. And then secondly, there will be, as I mentioned, opportunity at the end to speak or ask your question. So if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function at the end. And I just double checked and the raise hand function is working. There was a message that said it was not, but it should be enabled now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Hemphill with the Housing Department, who will just provide a brief background on homelessness and the emergency interim housing that we have so far.
Thanks, Reagan. And thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Kelly Hemphill, and I'm the Homelessness Response Manager for the City of San Jose. So the need for interim housing. In January 2019, the Homeless Census and Survey counted over 6,000 individuals experiencing homelessness in San Jose. That was actually an increase of 40% from the previous census. Of that 6,097 people counted, over 5,000 were unsheltered. And what I mean by unsheltered is that they were literally sleeping outside on the streets, in the parks, in tents, encampments, vehicles. So we know that there are a lot of people that we need to serve and we need to house quickly. We conduct the next homeless census in January 2021, so we'll get a better idea about how we're doing. COVID-19 actually exacerbated the emergency, resulting in hundreds of people losing their jobs or contracting the virus, for example, resulting in thousands of newly homeless and at-risk households. We worked with the county to act quickly, setting up congregate and non-congregate shelters, increasing permanent housing opportunities, and centralizing referrals. And as a result, thousands of homeless people were permanently housed and temporarily placed in motels and emergency shelters. And additionally, 15,000 households were provided rental assistance to prevent homelessness. Clearly, we know how to end homelessness, even in a pandemic, but we cannot meet the need. For every one person we house, 2 to 3 individuals enter our homeless service system for the first time. While our priority continues to be permanent affordable housing, the City of San Jose recognizes the need to move quickly and find creative solutions. Not one solution or housing option works for everybody. Next slide, please. On this slide, we'd like to play a movie for you.
It has been said many times that the best solution for homelessness is housing. And so we are constructing these 3 developments serving more than 300 residents, not in 4 or 5 years, but in 4 or 5 months.
And when I came here, I was so amazed, not only of the place, but the people here. The people here are fantastic, from the guards all the way to the staff and the caseworkers. They accepted my dog here. She has all the papers and everything. I feel like I'm home. Okay, I feel like I'm home. And I want to thank you, the governor, the mayor, the city, the county, for doing a project like this for us. Because this has been the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I really appreciate it with all my heart, because I feel safe here. That we were being treated like people. Okay? Not a statistic, but like real people. And I have to thank everyone here.
So what is emergency interim housing? It's interim housing, which is temporary housing, and it's designed to be a bridge to permanent housing. And it's actually pretty unique to the city of San Jose. Interim housing provides the opportunity for people who are linked to a supportive housing program with a short or long-term rental subsidy attached to stabilize and make connections to resources such as benefits enrollment, behavioral health, medical services, or employment. There are typically on-site supportive services at interim housing projects, including clinicians and case management, to assist participants to secure permanent housing. There are various designs to the permanent housing model. Local examples include converted motels or tiny homes. All models are temporary and not intended to be permanent. Tonight, we're focused on prefabricated modular units that we describe as emergency interim housing projects. Next slide, please. Existing interim housing in San Jose. In April 2020, the City of San Jose prioritized the development of 3 new emergency interim housing programs targeting homeless individuals, couples, and families with children who were vulnerable to COVID-19. The 3 new emergency interim housing communities added 346 new temporary beds to the overall homeless system. What separates these 3 new communities from other interim models is not only project design and layout, but also the prioritization of units with private restrooms and showers. Even in the short amount of time, the 3 emergency interim housing communities have been in operation, 375 individuals have been served. Next slide, please. So who will live at the Lot E community? As we transition from serving households vulnerable to COVID-19, there is an opportunity to be more creative in selecting a target population at the 4th EIH at Lot E. The community will be focused on serving up to 80 homeless individuals. The intent of the program at Lot E is to provide individuals with the tools to be independent and stable. The City of San Jose would like to leverage employment training and living wage jobs programs for participants to increase the likelihood of success in attaining and retaining permanent housing. We'd like to ensure relationships and support is established so that help is available while living at the emergency interim housing program at Lot E, but also after they move into permanent housing. We can also target particular areas or populations across the city. We have dozens of success stories each week at the 3 existing emergency interim housing communities, and I look forward to hearing more and seeing how this will be successful at the 4th emergency interim housing community. Now I'll hand it over to James Stagey.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you all for being with us tonight. James Stagey from the Housing Department. I have managed several of the construction of several of these projects along with our public works partners. You'll have to excuse my voice. I have a little bit of a cold today, so I'll try to get through this and without coughing on you. In terms of what will be built at the site, Kelly shared with you that we've completed 3 of these projects previously. This site will be very similar to those sites in terms of the units that we're using. And so she did share some pictures with you of some of the previous sites. We're going to be using modular construction. As the mayor said, we've been looking for ways to continue to streamline cost and effectiveness in building these. And we found that these are the most cost-effective units to put in place. This particular site will house approximately 80 individuals at the site. In addition to the sleeping units that we have, which Kelly mentioned, have their own individual bathrooms. There's community space. So we have amenities for residents to prepare their own meals. We have kitchens and laundry on site. The site is fully ADA, so accessible to all residents, whether they have mobility challenges or not. When we design these sites, and this goes all the way back to when we first began looking at bridge housing, and we started with cabins. The idea behind our design, as Kelly did mention, is to create a safe and clean environment for our residents, a place where they can thrive. And the design it's designed with intention for that. So we've designed around the services, residents, but also with the surrounding community in mind. So as I mentioned, in addition to the amenities like the community and laundry space, landscaping, enclosed parking, the site does have on-site security. So there's a check-in and check-out access point for the operators. These sites, as Kelly also mentioned, are temporary in nature. So these were built under the guidance of our Assembly Bill 2176, which provides the City of San Jose a little bit of flexibility in our design. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is a somewhat detailed concept of what the site will most likely look like. There will be a few modifications. We're still in the design process right now. We're about 35% within the design right now. So as you can see at the western end of the property is the Guadalupe Expressway with Guadalupe Avenue or Guadalupe Parkway as the frontage road, and that will be where the main entrance to the site is. You'll see that there are the sleeping cabins or the sleeping units on the north side of the property. And then the community space is just below that. And in between is a fire access. So we do have a lot of flexibility in what we can provide in terms of design. But there are some things that we wanted to ensure that we continue to provide, and that's, again, safety and cleanliness of the site. And so the fire safety was one of the key concerns. And so we have fire access, we have fire hydrants on site. In addition to that, the units themselves are, these particular units are fire sprinkled. That's about it for the site. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. In terms of the timeline, I believe the mayor or council member, I believe both of them talked a little bit about the timeline. We are set to go to council, and more than likely we're looking at mid-September. We're still working through a few of the final design pieces in order to establish the final grant or funding amount. Once we go to council, we will continue to work with our donor, as the mayor mentioned, through the generosity of Peter Powell and his foundation, and to develop or finalize our agreement with them. And we're hopeful that we could break ground sometime in mid to late fall. We anticipate somewhere between a 6 and 8 month construction period, and we're hopeful that we can, streamline that a little bit throughout the process. And we hope to house people by the middle of 2022. Next slide. So how did we choose this particular site? As Councilmember Peral has mentioned, this was one of the original sites that we brought to council back in 2017. Originally, we had brought to council was just a small portion of the overall site that was undeveloped. We looked at this as one of our potential opportunities. At the time, we had other sites that made more sense at the time, and were more readily accessible in terms of utility connections and construction. So those are the sites that we've currently have our emergency interim housing built on. Later on, we continued to evaluate our list of properties, as well as our partner public agencies like Caltrans and VTA and Santa Clara Valley Water District, who also provided some opportunities for us to utilize their sites. And this was the next site in line that was ideal. We looked at the ability to use part of the existing parking lot, and this just made the most sense. As I mentioned, we're building under our Assembly Bill 2176, which does provide us a lot of flexibility in terms of what we can build. In addition to AB 2176, we're also utilizing the governor's executive order N3220, which allows us to waive several of the CEQA requirements. However, we are still evaluating all of the potential impacts on the environment and community, and incorporating any mitigations that we need to ensure that there's no impact to the community. And again, we did bring several sites to council back in 2017. Currently, we have bridge housing communities and emergency interim housing sites located in districts 3, districts 2, districts 7, and district 6. So we're trying to ensure that these sites are spread throughout the community so that they have access to amenities throughout the community and transit, and are spread throughout the city. So with that, I believe that's, oh, one more. Will this impact the neighborhood? And again, we did receive a lot of concerns early on through the outreach process when we first started going out to the communities and talking about the bridge housing and the emergency interim housing communities. Now we have had our first bridge housing community has been in operation for 1.5 years. Our next biggest site, our Monterey and Burnell site, has been in operations for 10 months. And we have continued to monitor all of the The statistics, we communicate regularly with our San Jose Police Department on, activity throughout the neighborhoods, and we found that there is no additional impact to the community. And as a matter of fact, we've actually found that in some of these neighborhoods, some of the crime levels have dropped since we've brought in not only the community, but all of the services that are attached to that. So as I mentioned earlier, the site is currently developed to have on-site security 24/7. Visitors must sign in and out. We have operators that operate on-site as well 24/7. So in terms of community to the impact to the community, there's been no negative impact that we've had reported. So I will leave it at that, and let's go to the next slide. So as I believe somebody did talk a little bit about some of the community input that we've received before. One of the things that we've been doing from the very beginning of the bridge housing communities is trying to include the surrounding neighborhood in a regular meeting. And we've called them different things, but generally we call them a community advisory committee. And these particular groups will meet with the city staff, with the operations staff, and several of the businesses and surrounding communities and residents to provide feedback and input on, how these bridge housing communities are operating. This is one of the reasons that we know that the impact has been minimal. We've had really good feedback from the advisory group, and this is an opportunity for the community to get involved in decisions on the particular sites that are in their neighborhood. And with that, let's see, is there one more slide? And that is it. So we will open it up to questions.
So again, if people could use the raise hand function, so we know to call on you, and you'll have a minute to speak. Mary Tucker.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you for this. I'm a volunteer with the Garden to Table, the small community farm right next to the Taylor Street Bridge. And so we would also be right next to this entire development. And there are individuals living under the Taylor Street Bridge right there. And we've had several incidents where homeless individuals are jumping over our fairly tall fence, using our water, taking a lot of things, messing up the raised beds and everything else. Are you going to try and make sure that there are no homeless under the bridge? And what about security for that? Thank you.
So Kelly or James, do you want to answer that before we go on to the next speaker, who will be Antonina?
Sure, I can address some of that. Once we choose an operator, we will make sure that the operator outreaches around the community. We pride ourselves in having outreach teams talk to people who are surrounding each community and make sure that they're in our system to receive services. And if they are interested in living in their nearby emergency interim community, then we would want to know that. It is really important that we outreach to people who are literally outside, and this would not be any different. So certainly we could outreach to the gardens, and we'd welcome you being part of our advisory committee as well, so that you can express your concerns and celebrate the successes with us.
So, and I'll jump in. I know you mentioned, Mary, security. As I mentioned, we do currently have 24/7 security on site. Currently, the security at these sites also kind of monitor the surrounding area to ensure that anything that needs to be reported is reported promptly. And they're also really good about coordinating with the, as Kelly mentioned, the on-site outreach services that currently the two providers that we have that are providing services and operating the three sites that we have each have branches of outreach that they communicate with.
And I'll just add, I'm aware of that, the encampments, the tents actually that are underneath the overpass there, and it's almost connected to, if maybe even connected to the property that we're talking about here. So it would be a priority for us to not have encampments literally adjacent or abutting this one. So indeed, that would be an area of interest for us to want to make sure that we can reach out to those individuals, see if we can identify them as well for people that could be housed here, or just in general, ensuring that encampment didn't persist.
Thanks, Councilmember. Next speaker is Antonina.
Hi, thank you very much for having this and listening to the community. So I have a couple of questions. Hopefully I can say it pretty quickly. One of them is what you all have been talking about is community advising. Maybe I'd like to see a community advisory group formalized and meeting minimum once a month. And that means members of the community that such as myself or in the neighborhood, as well as those who are running the facility and whoever else is involved with authority to do something when there's an issue or if we want to help out. The second thing I want to ask is on the 24/7. Oh yeah, who can we contact? If one of us in the community finds something, we want to make sure that we can access somebody immediately when we see an issue, when we see a problem, when we see something that needs to be addressed. So two things, community advisory group and essentially an emergency number that the community can call to contact somebody there at the facility to help us out. Thank you.
So Kelly, I don't know if you want to also address this, but those are really great points. Number one, the community advisory group, absolutely. We have consistently held the community advisory groups for all of the rest of the sites, and that's the intent here as well. And then in terms of contact information at all of the other sites, we've provided the community some direct access to our operator. So if something does come up, they have that direct contact information.
Exactly, James. And I would just add that you would have direct access to city staff as well. And we'd welcome your questions and comments.
Thank you. Next speaker is Gail.
How much time do I get? It says 0. Okay.
There we go.
James, I wanted to ask you, hi James, I wanted to ask you real quick, how long will it take to get this site up and running, number one? And I know it'll probably be too late for any of the folks coming from Columbus Park. So, and there's no guidelines now or nothing's in the works for getting housing or doing anything for the folks at Columbus Park at this point. How long will all of this site be? When will that be finished once they break ground?
Hi, Gail. Good to hear from you. Great question. As I said, we are looking at a construction timeline of somewhere between 6 and 8 months. We are doing everything we can to try to expedite that. And obviously the goal would be to get that in sooner than that. So, we are looking at potentially breaking ground in October. So October, November, December through, like I said, we would be looking at housing folks in these sites by June at the latest.
So also at this time, you don't have any plans right now in the works for anything going on with Columbus Park folks?
Kelly, you might have more information on the Columbus Park. I don't have any detailed information on that.
Doesn't have anything either.
Well, as I mentioned, we are considering targeted populations for this site, and Columbus Park is absolutely one of the targeted spots that we are considering. We will, as the mayor had mentioned, we are leveraging employment programs, and that is a targeted area that we will be cleaning through our SJ Bridge program. And we will be leveraging the two programs, the Slot E and the SJ Bridge program, so that people have access to living wage jobs and housing. So it is absolutely under consideration, Gil.
And then as far as I understand, Kelly, and correct me if I'm wrong, or Reagan, in addition to this site, we have the other 3 emergency interim housing sites, the 2 bridge housing sites, and the motels that we've purchased. So I believe we're looking at every opportunity to try to house folks from those areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right, James. Okay, next speaker is Todd.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to first suggest, and I brought this up a lot, the meeting seems controlled. There's no transparency. You can see who the attendees are, but I can't see what neighbors I have that are attending the meeting. And I know that can be easily fixed. And I think citywide, they should have it as transparent and as similar to a public meeting as possible versus a controlled meeting. Some of my questions are, I'd like to know the time frame. What does emergency temporary housing mean? A year, 5 years, 10 years? What does emergency interim temporary housing mean? And then you're talking about targeting the Columbus Park people, but instead of calling it Columbus Park, I think it should be called the Minetta Crash Zone, because we're allowing unhoused people to live in a crash zone. And if I'm hearing correctly, your plan is to allow them to stay there until June while you build 100 units, which there's more than 100 people there. So I'm having a hard time with that being the plan. I'm really a proponent of the sanctioned encampments that were proposed and shot down by city council. I think housing should look at providing the most benefit to the most people for the least amount of money in the quickest time frame. And building tiny homes is better than apartments, which would take years, but even a year to house 340 people is a long time.
Thank you so much for your public comment.
No, I had questions.
So Todd, could you repeat what your question is?
One of my questions was, what is the time frame implied by emergency interim temporary housing?
When we first stood up the emergency interim housing communities, it was largely in response to the pandemic. And so we wanted to ensure that people had a safe place to shelter in place. And so as we transition out of this pandemic, we are looking at going back to our originally intended model, which is serving people who are connected to a housing subsidy and case management. And ideally, people would transition to permanent housing within 120 days of living at an interim site. Now, we understand that some people may take longer and some people may do it in a quicker, much quicker. So we are flexible, but we do measure success by making sure that people have a housing plan to move on and are stably housed in permanent housing.
Maybe I can just add a little more color as well, Todd, to answer the concern. You know, transitional housing is something relatively new to the city of San Jose. We've been a big believer in building permanent supportive housing for all the right reasons, because we know that's the only real solution is getting somebody permanently housed. But there's no question that the cost and the time to build that housing is something that's making it essentially, it's putting the problem out of our reach, or putting the solutions out of our reach if we really want to address the imminent needs for thousands of our residents. So we've used a few different models, from tiny homes to motels, as transitional housing locations. And we've had some good success in those instances, and the housing department's done an incredible job. I remember just talking a couple months ago to a woman who had moved out of one of our tiny home communities that's over not far from my house on Mayberry Road. And she described the experience as being a really positive one, helped her get back on her feet. She also overcame an addiction. She was back working again, which was tremendous. So for her, it was a great success. She was there, I think, 2 or 3 months. You know, on the other hand, I can tell you, I remember going to a tiny home community in Seattle, and you know, where they had various different models, and talked to a woman who had been living there for 5 years. Now I don't expect that's going to be our model, but you know, the reality is this is a very hard, challenging issue, right? How do we move people into a permanent, steady housing situation when they have been enormously challenged by every kind of health issue, in some cases mental health, some cases addiction, some cases physical impairments, and we need to find a way to help get them back on their feet. And so it's not simple, it's not easy, and there's no simple basic formula. But I think the gist is we're going to try to move people through communities like this in a matter of months. And so far, I think we're off to a pretty good start. This model is different than the other two that I discussed because it involves prefabricated modular housing. It's not tiny homes. These are essentially dorms, dorm rooms with bathrooms in them. And I think a much more dignified way of living probably than tiny homes. It's more space and in a community with a bit more infrastructure and basic services. So I think this is a great solution. I appreciate your concern about the crash zone, but keep in mind that crash zone is what you describe as a crash zone is in fact a park where I go running, where I know people play baseball, or at least used to, in Columbus Park, where we've got thousands of people who drive through that area on 880. So it's not as though there are not human beings in that space. It is not unsafe for any of us to be, or else we wouldn't be spending many, many hours in that space as we do today. The fact that people are there, I don't believe is a particular health risk from the standpoint of airplanes. Obviously, we have never had a crash there. FAA's primary concern, I'm told, is about noise and noise impacts from the planes on human beings, and that's why we don't want people living there.
Thank you, Mayor. Next speaker is Cindy, and then after Cindy, we will get to the questions that folks have put in the Q&A. Go ahead, Cindy.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I live on 3rd and Heading, which is right in the thick of things. And we have bridge housing now on Mission and First, then this proposed housing. We have the hotel down on First Street. And my concern is that, first of all, I want to know, are the residents of this bridge housing going to be coming solely from the Guadalupe River area? Or are we going to also be bringing people in from other parts of San Jose and Santa Clara County? And also, my second question is, will neighbors begin to see less crime and blight in the neighborhood now that we have so much of this supportive housing and bridge housing? Are we going to see better crime protection and less blight?
Thanks, Cindy. So I'll start, and then James or Kelly can fill in. So the priority will be for people who are currently encamped in the Guadalupe Heading area. We will be serving San Jose residents, so we won't be serving, you know, a homeless person who is camped in Sunnyvale, for example. We spend our San Jose funds on San Jose residents, particularly in a model like this, where we're not taking from what we call our coordinated entry system, then we can prioritize San Jose residents. And then your second question around the crime, I will say that with our existing 5 interim housing sites, we have not seen an increase in crime. Those sites have community advisory committee meetings where the police department does attend and provide monthly stats, and we have not seen an increase in crime. We also coordinate on city services. So when there is, for example, illegal dumping near one of our interim housing facilities, we coordinate across departments to quickly resolve those issues. I don't know if anyone else from the city would like to jump in.
I can just jump in just to add a bit more. Cindy, I know you understandably want us to say, of course, we're going to reduce crime and blight by doing this, and can't simply promise that. But here's what I can say. And part of that is because I think we need to recognize the majority of crime and the majority of blight is actually not caused by our unhoused residents, as much as we'd like to believe it is. You know, the reality is that our crime rates were in many cases higher in the past in this city when we have a lot less homeless. They're simply caused by criminals who are committing crime. And some of them are homeless and some, but the overwhelming majority are not. And I should say the same thing when it comes to blight. We're seeing where the illegal dumping is happening. You know, it's a bunch of subcontractors who are dumping their stuff because they don't want to pay to take loads to the dump. You know, we're seeing graffiti from, you know, kids who are tagging. Yes, there's no question that having people live outside who are homeless absolutely will create trash and blight. But I think we need to recognize the source of these challenges is much different, much more diverse. I do think this, though. There's no question that homelessness has scarred our city physically, in addition to emotionally and socially. And as we see the physical scars, and they're very real, there's no question in my mind that getting people housed will dramatically help our city. Because to whatever extent we may feel that it is unsafe for us as community members, and equally important, unsafe for unhoused residents when we're living in a city with 6,000 or 7,000 unhoused people, you can be certain that the one way that we ensure that people who are unhoused are less needy, less desperate, less likely to commit crime is by housing them. So there's no question in my mind this can help. Whether one project will suddenly make the difference, no, I don't think so. We have to get a lot of projects done and we have to do a lot of work together. But I think this is an important step. And I want to get the hundreds of people who are living in Guadalupe River Park housed, because that's the best way to keep them safe and to keep you safe and to keep everyone else safe.
Thanks, Mayor. Next person with a raised hand is Tina.
Hi. Hi, hopefully you guys can hear me. First, I would like to say, well, thank you. I would like to voice that I am in favor of this project. I know it's controversial. I have high hopes that it will be run the way you are describing it, that there will be a community advisory committee. Here is a concern, though, that I have, which is over 40% of our homeless they self-report as having psychological, emotional, psychiatric conditions. This isn't according to the 2019 City Homeless Report. And so many of those behaviors that they have really need to be addressed with specific intensive mental help. That may not happen with this particular project, but I do want to just put out there that we are going to need to start thinking about having institutions for folks who really need this kind of help. So just wanted to put that out there. Thanks for your work on this project.
Thanks, Tina. I will say that the staffing at our 3 other emergency interim housing sites, there is a clinician on site who's available to help with those behavioral health needs. But I will say, larger, big picture wise, our behavioral health system certainly isn't meeting the needs of many, either housed or unhoused, and there is work to do there to meet an unmet need. Thanks for your comment.
Maybe I could also just weigh in. I'm sorry to do this again to you, Reagan, but Reagan has said it exactly right, but she's also being very diplomatic. Look, the city just doesn't have any expertise, resources, or authority over behavioral health. What we are doing is trying to partner with the county. In some cases, we have actually used some of our housing funding, I know, to support behavioral health in outreach and in homeless encampments and so forth. But it has never been the responsibility of cities in the state of California to address mental health issues. That's always been the county and the state's responsibility. They get the funding, they have the doctors, they have the authority. We don't even have mental health authority in many cases to be able to make these decisions. So what we're trying to do is create the infrastructure that makes this possible. And obviously having on-site mental health providers is really critical. And that's why I really appreciate what the staff has done here in setting this up. So I completely agree with your point, Tina, and I really want to applaud you because I know that you live only a couple blocks away from this particular site. And the fact that you would come out and say that you support it is obviously, it says a lot. So thank you very much, Tina.
Thanks, Mayor. Next speaker is Jason. Jason, you're muted if you're speaking.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, awesome. Good evening, everyone. This is Jason Steer from the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy. I just want to say thank you, Mayor, council members, city staff for all the work on this project. We are certainly in an emergency situation with the homelessness crisis, as well as the FAA directive immediately. And like many folks here, we are very intimate with the situation around the river park right now. I also do want to appreciate the outreach from the city on connecting future residents to workforce opportunities to take care of our park. I think this is a very interesting opportunity actually to think about housing, services, and jobs put together and thinking about all the potential of leveraging all that through parks overall and with the river park to start. The Conservancy is optimistic on the action to find safer places for our residents to live, and we look forward to following this project.
Thanks, Jason. I don't see any more hands raised for the moment, so I'm gonna go to some of the questions in the Q&A. From Antonina, she says, how does the city measure success of this project?
So I think, thanks for that question. Success to us is seeing the people that we serve move into permanent housing. And I know that's a fluffy answer, but it's real. We hold our operators accountable through contractual agreements with performance outcomes that we monitor and measure closely. And we've been relatively successful. I think this is going to be the first EIH that will start outside of our pandemic. So we'll be optimistic that the goals will be met.
Thanks, Kelly. Also from Antonina, when this tiny home project is implemented, will there be some type of moratorium on other similar projects in our immediate area? We have reached saturation levels with the existing and planned projects.
Well, I can attempt to answer that. I think as the mayor said, this one particular project will not solve the problem alone. Even with the existing EIH or emergency interim housing sites and bridge housing sites, we're going to continue to keep looking for opportunities like this to be able to temporarily house folks on their way to permanent housing. So, I mean, I think we're going to try to be as thoughtful as we can as we continue to look for sites and opportunities. Really, the key things that we're looking for in sites are, buildability, proximity to transit and amenities. And, we are very fortunate to have a council member who is very understanding and accommodating and understands that District 3 in particular is such a well-located area that we do have a few more of these sites than in some of the other districts, although we are, as I mentioned before, looking to utilize sites throughout the city. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I'll weigh in too, because I would agree, right? I mean, it's always something that we're conscious about. And at the moment we have, I think 2 down in District 2, the 1 in District 3, 1 in District 6, 1 in District 4. So they are spread right now. And that's our intention. And it was our intention pre-pandemic as we started down this pathway to try and really ensure that this type of solution, as we know, this is just one of the many solutions, that it too was spread throughout the city as an opportunity of housing. Where I think that this differs from, there's a current conversation which a number of residents, including Antonina on this Zoom today, are familiar with, which is our siting policy. And the siting policy is specifically talking about our funding support and siting locations of permanent housing developments. And so this in and of itself as a unique type of housing is not necessarily going to be factored into that equation. But I will say that much like we're conscious about it today, we're not going to be looking for instance, another bridge housing site that would be, kitty corner to this or in the immediate area. We're looking, and we have a complete list throughout the entire city, and that would be our interest certainly would be my interest in as an advocate of the community as well.
Anthony, can I also just add, I think I recognize there's a very sophisticated group of neighborhood leaders, which you're one, in downtown, who are understandably saying, look, we're bearing a lot more than our share. And there's no question about that. We would love to partner with you to help us identify sites else in other parts of the city, particularly to the extent that you would be willing to help and advocate. For example, when we identify a site in District 6 that the Water District owns, that at the time District Councilmember Davis was quite supportive of having, I think, an emergency housing community of some kind on. We'd love to have advocates pushing the Water District to say yes, rather than backing down. We're going to have another one of these emergency housing communities down in District 10. I think Councilmember Mahan's going to need some help from advocates in the community to say yes, because there's going to be plenty of people in his neighborhood who are going to say no. So we would love to work with advocates in the community to say there needs to be responsibility that's shared here in this city. And to the extent that you and others might have interest in doing something like that, I would love to have you working with our team. We can plug you into all the things that are going on and see if we can work together on this. And I can tell you, finding sites is the hardest part of this business. There is something wrong with every site we find. And I can tell you there's a neighborhood somewhere nearby. And by the way, I have not heard yet this from these neighborhoods that are on this conversation today, from Hyde Park, from Vendome, from Japantown. I know there are many neighbors here that I know well who could easily be saying, go put it somewhere else. And I haven't heard that tonight. And that is very much to your credit. But I can tell you everywhere else in the city we go, they say, put it somewhere else. And by that, they usually mean downtown or not in my neighborhood. And the challenge we have is finding sites that we can actually acquire or lease. Often those are publicly owned by other agencies. Maybe it's Caltrans, maybe it's the VTA, maybe it's the county. I mean, I would love for some of these other agencies to be identifying and offering their own sites. And sometimes it's just a difficult community, sort of a community that's simply opposed. And that's, and that takes a lot of work. And, I know Councilmember Perales and I and many of the housing officials here have all been in those community meetings where you got 300 people in a room, all incredibly upset about the location of wherever you want to house unhoused people. And, I think to the credit of the city, for the most part, we've moved forward where it makes sense to do so, and we don't back down. But we need community support in saying, we need more of our city embracing these communities. So we'd love to have your help and look forward to working with you if you're interested.
All right, thanks, Mayor. Question from two people, actually. What are the site rules and code of conduct? Kelly, you want to take that one?
Sure. Site rules and code of conduct. So there is a code of conduct. We do require the operators at our current EIH sites to develop an operations manual. Every client has to sign a program agreement agreeing to code of conduct and rules. There are rules at these sites. And it'll be the same for this site. We hold people in the highest regard. If you violate the rules in the program agreement, that could be a reason for a discharge. And but of course, we try to work with our participants in order to resolve any kind of issue that comes up. We do not allow guests, for example. The violent behavior is never tolerated. These are just a couple examples of some of the rules that we have.
Let me just clarify, we're not allowing guests right now because of COVID restrictions, but after COVID, guests are allowed, but guests access is controlled. So guests must sign in and out. There are things like quiet hours. There are rules around no loitering, for example, on the outside of the property. So when we don't yet have an operator for this site, but when we do and we have that community advisory committee convening, we will share those rules and codes of conduct.
And Reagan and Kelly, if I could interject just to add one more thing is, as Kelly mentioned, there are consequences to not following rules. And obviously the worst thing would be to see somebody get displaced. We've been operating our VHCs now for 1.5 years and the emergency interim housing at Monterey now for 10 months. And we have had very, very few incidents where we've had to ask people to leave the site. By far, the residents that are staying at this site are doing everything they possibly can to follow the rules, to remain good residents, and be part of the community.
Thanks, James. All right, so next question from Tim. What additional police patrols will be offered to reduce the criminal activity affecting the neighborhoods that border the GRP and this project? We've been told in a meeting by Acosta that their hands are tied and that people are simply released back into our community within minutes of being booked. Will these homes be available for San Jose residents that are unhoused and currently living on the river? And will this mean that the river will be cleared of homeless and remain cleared moving forward? All right, Tim, there's a lot in that question. So there will not be additional police patrols in this area. We're a very thinly staffed police force, but we do coordinate regularly with police. As I mentioned, there is always a police representative at our community advisory committee meetings that report out on the crime stats in the immediate area, and also are there to listen to residents and businesses that may have concerns either. And then regarding your question, will the homes be available for San Jose residents that are unhoused and currently living on the river? I think we addressed that question previously, but we will be targeting that Guadalupe River Park area, the Heading and Spring area. And will this mean that the river will be cleared of homeless and remain cleared moving forward? That's a harder question. I think will be for the area of Heading and Spring. That's the 40 acres that the FAA has expressed their concerns about. There are plans to keep that clear in the future and not let that area re-encamp. And the primary means for that will be erecting a fence around that 40 acres. But I don't think I can guarantee that there will not be homeless along the creeks with Guadalupe. Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think the answer there pretty simple. The answer is no. I think we can't necessarily promise that there's not going to be anybody coming back to those areas. It is our intent, as we're talking about here, to prioritize housing the individuals that are essentially already neighbors to this location. And we know that we have, a timeline that we're working through with the FAA to clear that. And as Reagan, you just said, to fence off 40 acres area there. But the Guadalupe itself is not going to be fenced off. And we know we've had an issue pre-pandemic and likely we'll have an issue post-pandemic until we can actually get sufficient people housed. And so I think the reality is we're still going to have the challenges. This is, going to be but one of the solutions. It's our hope, certainly it's my hope, right, that we can keep these areas cleared. And it's, the interest of ours to get the people that are living there housed, not just for the sanitation purposes of the area, but for their housing needs and our general community needs. So that's our goals. But I think, the simple answer there, as you've pointed out, and as I'm pointing out here is no, we can't, there's not going to be any commitment to that in and of itself.
Thanks, Councilmember. Next question from Laura. COVID has come up several times. Has the city vaccinated the homeless to stop the spread? The city is working very closely with the county, specifically it's called Valley Homeless Healthcare, who have been focused on vaccinating the unhoused. I believe over 2,000 unhoused have been vaccinated as of now, and that effort continues with targeted outreach. The county is funding some targeted outreach to encampments to try and increase vaccinations. Next question from Tina. If the people are coming from the Guadalupe area, how many people live there right now? I'm trying to determine how many people will be left in the Guadalupe area. So we have done a census with our outreach team, but also with our city staff of the 40 acres that the FAA is most concerned about. We did a census to count you know, how many burned out vehicles there are, how many boats, how many washers and dryers. There's quite a bit in there, but we also counted people, and we estimate there are around 200 people living in that 40 acres. So these 80 units will certainly not address the entirety of the Guadalupe heading and spring area. But we are working on other resources. I think James mentioned we're still able to make referrals to our 3 other emergency interim housing sites, as well as our other tiny home sites and other supportive housing programs, whether that's rapid rehousing, which is a rental subsidy program, permanent supportive housing, or even hotels and motels that the city and county are purchasing. Anyone else want to add to that?
I think you covered it.
With about 12 minutes left, I'm going to try and zip through some of these last questions. One from Antonina: is it possible for the city to designate an area of the GRP, a small area near the neighborhood that can be cleared of unhoused, so we can have a small area of GRP used? At a minimum, could the city get the automobiles off the GRP trail? So we are working on the vehicles. As I mentioned, we did, as I said, a census of vehicles, but also we're working on getting contracts in place to tow vehicles and remove a lot of that large debris. And again, with the eventual goal of those 40 acres being cleared. Anyone else want to add to answer Antonina's question?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
We can hear you, Mayor.
Oh, you okay? I'm sorry. Forgive me. My apologies. I was having problems with my device. Thank you. I just want to offer, look, our ambitions are far greater than just clearing an area of some of the park for people to be able to use comfortably again. The idea is to restore the entire park. And I know Jason Sue is with us and commented earlier, the executive director. We have committed a significant amount of money, I know with Councilmember Peralta's push as well, in this last budget on a really significant cleanup of Guadalupe River Park. And we are obviously going to be working hard to comply with the FAA or to move all the people who are currently living in the park out of the park, hopefully all to housing one way or another. And that's going to happen over the next year or so. And it's going to take time. It's a lot of work. Obviously, this pandemic has had a devastating impact on a lot of people. And it's also impaired the city's ability to simply control public space because we were having, we were under recommendations from CDC and other health authorities not to move unhoused people for public safety reasons, public health reasons. So that has left the park in the conditions it's in, and we are adamant that we are going to restore this park and we're going to bring it back so that everyone in the public feels comfortable in the park again. So it won't just be a part of it, we're bringing it all back.
There's a question from Laura. As a registered vote and taxpayer, I find this presentation insulting to our needs. 80 tiny homes will house 80/7,000 homeless. I want to know how this and the Kelsey affect my property value? I've lived in this neighborhood for almost 60 years and the lip service is disgusting. I'm a Democrat who may not vote that way due to 2 projects the city has forced on us. So, Laura, there is no studies or evidence that says affordable housing or permanent supportive housing or even shelters negatively impact property values. Sorry, just scrolling through looking for questions that versus comments.
Reagan, I wanted to answer one of them from
Oh,
Todd.
go ahead.
Todd asked the question, how many unhoused will need to be provided housing to end the homeless crisis? And I think the best direction that I'll give for him and then anybody else interested, we do have a community plan to end homelessness, which is a county-wide plan that just got its first update. It originally was created in 2015 and then was updated last year, 2020. It's a plan that's adopted by each city in the county. And I think it's got the best comprehensive answer for you there when you look at the overall crisis of the homeless crisis that we have, because as we know, it's not just something here downtown. It's not just about the city of San Jose. It's our entire region here. And so I think that's the best place if you wanted to search that, the Santa Clara County Community Plan to End Homelessness. It's a report put together by Destination Home in partnership with all the different cities in the county. That's the best place, I think, for that answer and other answers like that.
Thank you. A question from Victoria. Hello, Mayor. If there is support from your office to ensure equitable distribution of temporary, supportive, and permanent housing throughout the city of San Jose, I will help to advocate. Sorry, guess that was not a question.
By the way, thank you. I was responding to a few folks, I think Craig and Tina Antonino, with email contacts. Feel free to share your email or send your email to us and we'll be happy to reach out to you. Thank you.
And Reagan, I see the fairground question has come up a couple of times. And so just to address that, the fairgrounds is county-owned property. Please feel free to lobby the heck out of your county supervisors and tell them that you're interested in whatever use you may think you may deem appropriate for the county property. We don't have jurisdiction or authority over that. And so it's really, barking up the wrong tree for any of us here at the city to have some advocacy there. I will say, I will say I have been vocally supportive of using even just a portion of the county fairgrounds. The mayor has as well. So we're not, we are with you on that one, but it's not within our authority or jurisdiction.
Yeah, can I go back a couple questions ago? There was, a neighbor or resident who felt that, their intelligence was being insulted by the notion that 80 units was going to somehow solve the problem. And I just want to address that very serious concern about scale, because of course it's not going to solve the problem. It's going to solve the problem for 80 individuals, that's for certain. And that's really important if you happen to be unhoused. But keep in mind, first, these are transitional housing communities. And if it all works well, and we've seen it work well on a couple models we've tried so far, it means you can actually cycle these units through several individuals per year, which means that you're helping not just 80, but perhaps hundreds of residents every year because of this one community. So first, it's important to recognize the impact that these transitional housing communities can have. We started this effort back at a time when we had a problem where we had a lot of folks with Section 8 vouchers and VASH vouchers who could actually pay rent, but were living outside, unable to find an apartment because of the very tight housing market. And we needed somewhere for them to live for 2 or 3 or 4 months until an apartment could open. So that's really what these communities help to solve, is that problem with folks who simply can't get into the apartment. I should also add, certainly we'd love to go build 800 unit complexes, or for that matter, 5,000 unit complexes if we could. I'm not certain anyone would want to live next to one. And the reality is we're in a city that is largely built out with lots of neighborhoods. And so we have to find ways to build many of these communities throughout our city in a way that's integrated in the fabric of our city, not just warehousing poor people in one site. And that's sort of the vision here, because I think both as a matter of making this work and make it function well for the unhoused residents, and also for our community that is housed. This is still a very democratic city, and people simply are going to tolerate the notion that we just go build a location for 1,000 people. That's not going to work. We know what that looks like. We've seen it before in places like Chicago with Henry Horner Homes and elsewhere. That's a miserable failure, and that's not the model that's going to work. So we're trying a distributed approach because we believe that's the best way that human beings can live together in a community where we've got humans who are desperately in need of help.
Thanks, Mayor. 3 minutes left and 2 questions left. So Todd, the second part of his question was, what is the projected cost to end homelessness in San Jose?
A lot. So it depends how you do it. But if we were to suddenly go build a bunch of apartments from scratch, if we do the math, it's $700,000 a unit. And we know we have at least 7,000 unhoused residents. The number gets to be about $5 billion. That's just back of the envelope. But that doesn't take care of services or anything like that. That just builds the housing, if that's any context.
And final question from Jason. First, would the Community Advisory Committee also include the residents of the emergency housing project? Yes, absolutely. We always want to incorporate the voices of those with lived experience of homelessness. And Jason's second question, what are the challenges of leasing vacant private property sites, big parking lots, vacant buildings, et cetera, for future projects?
Well, I can touch base on that. Obviously, the challenge is time. Currently, and I think somebody had asked the question before about the duration of the units. Currently, we have the authority to continue to operate these until 2025 through our assembly bill. I'm going to take an educated guess and say that will probably extend. These particular units are built to last at least 10 to 15 years. So the problem with leasing private property is can we lease private property for certain for that period of time? And so property that's held within the city that we can have control over, we can have a better sense of the duration that they'll be in place.
Thanks, James. So it is exactly 8 o'clock, which is the time we said we would end. Are there any final words, Mayor or Councilmember Perales?
I just want to say I really appreciate the quality of the questions and the comments. Clearly, we've got a community that's deeply engaged and understands the challenges here, and I appreciate this. This is not easy, and our community has been deeply burdened by this problem, and we haven't solved it. And we've got to work together and push really hard to solve this one. And I'm committed to doing it because frankly, nobody else has figured this out anywhere else in the United States, and we've got to be the leaders. This is so critically important. So thank you. everyone for taking the time, and thank you for your involvement. Councilman Frost?
Yeah, I'll echo that as well. And, I have been fortunate, as the mayor points out, the battles are a lot different, a lot more challenging in other districts. It's not to say that we're without challenge here in District 3, but I've been fortunate to have residents that are engaged, and they're engaged on the solutions. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're simply open to any and all solutions, but to have residents that are so deeply engaged, understanding, willing to work through some of these challenges. And quite frankly, there's a lot of efforts going on right now, as I mentioned earlier, about the siding policy and other things that a lot of the people that were participating today have been engaged on. So I say thank you as well, and look forward to continuing to work with our community members.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. So on the screen, there is an email for Jeff Scott from the Housing Department. If there are additional questions, we will post this evening's presentation and the video on the Housing Department's website. Thank you again for attending, for your time and your questions. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody.